Howdy folks, Ryan here. The last several days have produced an absolute wealth of material for a Matt Taibbi watcher like myself. Check out my previous video for the background on how he went from being a crusading Wall Street critic to a lick-spittle toady for the richest person in the world. But we've got some incredibly juicy updates now, and I've just got to weigh in. It all started when Taibbi was invited to testify before Congress by Republicans. Oh, here he's hanging out with his new good pal, Ted Cruz. Wonder if it was awkward, given that Matt wrote this about Cruz back in 2016 in his book, Insane Clown President. Apologies in advance for butchering this German word that's coming up. Quote, Cruz in person is almost physically repellent. Psychology Today even ran an article by a neurology professor named Dr. Richard Seidewijk about the peculiarly off-putting qualities of Cruz's face. He used a German term, Backpfeifengesicht, literally a face in need of a good punch, to describe Cruz. This may be overstating things a little. Cruz certainly has an odd face. It looks like someone sewed pieces of a waterlogged Reagan mask together at gunpoint. But it's his tone more than anything else that gets you. He speaks slowly and loudly and in the most histrionic language possible, as if he's certain you're too stupid to grasp that he is for freedom. Taibbi also compared Cruz to an incurable skin condition on Twitter back in 2018. I guess bygones are bygones. Anyway, testifying before Congress, Taibbi went through his Twitter files material I mentioned in my previous video. I'm not going to go through the whole mess step by step, but I'll link to some Tech Dirt articles by Mike Masnick if you want full details. What's interesting to me is that, as Marcy Wheeler pointed out, Matt made a big fat error testifying under oath. He said, and cited evidence on Twitter, that the Election Integrity Partnership, an academic effort to study election misinformation, had worked with CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security.
Mr. Taibbi.
If I could, I think thank you, Mr. Congressman, and there's an important point. In conjunction with our own research, there's the Foundation for Freedom Online, which, there's a very telling video that they uncovered where the director of Stanford's Election Integrity Partnership talks about how CISA, the DHS agency, didn't have the capability to do election monitoring, and so that they kind of stepped in to fill the gaps legally before that capability could be amped up. And what we see in the Twitter files is that Twitter executives did not distinguish between DHS or CISA and this group EIP. For instance, we would see a communication that said, from CISA escalated by EIP.
Except this was completely wrong. Taibbi's comments here reference one of his tweets, which contains a screenshot referencing CIS, which stands for the Center for Internet Security, a private nonprofit that works in this area. These are two entirely different entities. Fast forward to a couple weeks later when MSNBC anchor Mehdi Hasan was needling Taibbi online and he offered to come on. Hasan accepted the offer and came prepared with some tough questions. It's a long interview, but I want to point out just 3 things. First, Hasan pointed out that Taibbi had mixed up the number of tweets studied by the Election Integrity Project after the election, which was about 22 million, with the number flagged for removal, which was less than 3,000. Twitter also left the vast majority of even those tweets up.
Report?
Yeah, it came from a report in March. Do you know what the 22 million number is, Matt? Can you tell me? Because we checked. 22 million is the number of tweets about election misinformation that they just mapped. How many tweets were they? The ones they actually flagged to Twitter before the election, 22 million came after the election. It wasn't in the run-up. They flagged 3,000. So you were off by 21,997,000. That's another error.
They said a lot of things. I stand by my story.
Hey, what's missing the correct number by a factor of 7,600 between friends? Then Hasan brought up the CIS-CISA mix-up. Taibbi had to admit fault on this one and later corrected it online. Third, and most amazingly, Hasan brought up the fact that Mr. Free Speech defender Elon Musk is working hand in glove with the government of Narendra Modi in India to censor a documentary critical of him. Despite the fact that this story was what Hasan was needling him about on Twitter in the first place with the tweet that sparked the entire interaction, Taibbi was caught totally flat-footed.
You're saying that he's good for Twitter and good for speech. I'm saying he's using Twitter to help one of the most right-wing governments in the world censor speech. I will criticize that. Will you?
I have to look at the story first. I'm not looking at it now.
Hold on. I posted the story 2 weeks ago. You tweeted at me.
I don't watch the Mehdi Hassan show.
You do, actually you do, because you tweeted at me saying, invite me on the show and I'll tell you my views. Here you are.
No,
what is your view?
There it is.
There it is. Look. Yeah, and you said, look, we'll read your words. Why don't you invite me on your show to talk about it since you're so absolutely sure of what I'll say? You're right, I'm not sure. What is your view on Musk working with Modi to censor speech?
That's what you ask him about the particulars about it, but listen.
Even when prompted to preserve some shred of credibility, he had nothing but groveling praise for Musk.
How did you go, Matt, from being the scourge of Wall Street, the man who called Goldman Sachs the vampire squid, to being unwilling to say anything critical at all about this right-wing reactionary anti-union billionaire?
Look, so I like Elon Musk. I met him. This is part of the calculation when you do one of these stories. Are they going to give you information that's going to make you look stupid? Do you think their motives are sincere about doing X or Y? And I didn't. I thought. I mean, I did. I thought his motives were sincere about the Twitter files, and I admired them. I think he did a tremendous public service in opening the files up. But that doesn't mean I have to agree with him about everything. And
Agreed. I agree with you, but you never disagree with him. You've gone silent. People would say that's access journalism.
No.
One minor side note here. After getting owned by Hassan, Taibbi wrote an article complaining about it on Substack. Quote, I last appeared on MSNBC 6 years ago on January 13th, 2017 to talk with Chris Hayes and, of all people, Malcolm Nance about the then burgeoning Trump-Russia scandal, unquote. He also said the same thing on Twitter. This is a lie. Taibbi was invited on MSNBC in October 2017 to talk about his book on Eric Garner. I know he knows about this because I've mentioned it to him several times now, and an excerpt of that segment was in the intro to his interview on Mehdi Hassan's show. But he hasn't acknowledged it. Presumably, Taibbi has chosen to lie because doing so strengthens his argument that he's been shut down by liberals over Russia stuff. He also might not want to remind his new right-wing audience that he used to be a lib who wrote about police brutality. If I could change anything about my previous video on him, I'd emphasize more that just like his pal Glenn Greenwald, Taibbi also drove himself nuts denying the bleeding obvious about Trump and Russia. But let's set that aside and get to the really good part. After all Taibbi had done for Musk in his horseshit Twitter files narrative, including abasing himself on national television.
So I like Elon Musk.
Musk threw him right under the bus. Substack, where Taibbi has been getting most of his income these days, has apparently been working on a Twitter-style app thing. In response, Musk temporarily blocked people from posting links to Substack, blocked engagement on tweets from Substack itself, and redirected searches about it to newsletter instead. Once again, this was exactly the kind of politically motivated speech suppression that Musk and his spear carriers like Taibbi claim to be super worried about, except 1,000 times more blatant and effective. Instead of some random academics timidly asking Twitter to maybe think about deleting some specific tweets that lie about election details, which can be an actual crime, by the way, a right-wing billionaire just bans all traffic to a competitor. Back when Musk bought Twitter, journalist Adam Johnson pressed Taibbi on the danger that Musk's purchase posed to independent reporters who had come to rely on the platform. Taibbi blithely refused to understand the argument, insisting if you collapse because you lose a free distribution tool, that's not you being put out of business by a billionaire, that's sucking. And now not only is Musk openly carrying out the exact worst-case scenario that his critics feared, he's specifically doing it to the platform where his most loyal servant Matt Taibbi makes his money. Oh, we do so love to see it. So Taibbi dug deep, found one last tiny tattered scrap of self-respect, and announced that he was giving up Twitter and moving over to Substack full-time. Musk, unsurprisingly, retaliated by unfollowing him and blocking all search queries on his handle. At time of recording, the only way you can see his tweets is by going directly to his page or using an external search engine. Musk also accused Taibbi of being a Substack employee, which is not true according to the Substack CEO. This has to be one of the most humiliating things I've ever seen in my life. I almost feel sorry for Matt. Almost. But it's a lesson at least about right-wing narcissist oligarchs like Elon Musk or Donald Trump. No matter how much of a groveling sycophant you are towards them, they will turn on you the very instant it's convenient for them, or even just for fun. It's only a matter of time. As David J. Roth once wrote about Trump, with words that could apply equally well to Musk, the rest of the world is an abstraction to him, a market to exploit. There is no other person in it who is real to him. Anyway, that's it. Just a quick one for today. Smash the usual buttons and check out my book and newsletter if you want. I'll be back soon.